Guys, I'm excited to be here. Last week we started a series called God's Plan, inspired by the prophet Drake. Just kidding. Just kidding. But we did start a series called God's Plan, and Pastor Gabe kicked it off with a series or a message on forgiveness, and forgiveness is a big part of God's plan. And today we're continuing that series talking about family, specifically God's family. God's family is a big part of His plan. And speaking of family, I've been building my little family. This month, March 5th, we celebrated 2 years of marriage. And big deal, big deal. And it was interesting because we only celebrated one anniversary with no kids, and then this anniversary was with a baby. And so our little baby's about to be 3 months in a couple of days. And she is super passionate about everything. She really loves to express herself so much that tears fall from her eyes all day long. We love her. And we're figuring it out. We're figuring this family thing out, and we're learning how to be a family. And you know, early on in my marriage, which was like last year, my wife made a comment to me that really stood out to me. I had been coming home stressed out every day and just not in the best mood. And by this time, the honeymoon phase was over, the dating phase was over. I mean, we still date, but like the getting to know you dating phase was over. And I was starting to settle back into my rhythm and routine, and I was getting back to work and working a lot. And I never noticed how much stress I carry from work just because there was never anybody there on the other end when I got home to receive it. But apparently I carry a lot of stress on a normal day-to-day basis. And but one particular day I came home, and I was actually in a good mood. I was being playful, silly, happy, and we were having a really good time. Me and my wife were connecting. And then she made a comment. She says, this is the real you. This is who I really like to be around. This person is fun. I don't like it when you're stressed out. You're not that pleasant to be around. And I started thinking, who is the real me? Who is the real me? What am I like when I'm really healthy, in a healthy mental state, in a healthy emotional state? Which version is the real me? And I think we all have different versions of ourselves depending on the situation. Have you guys ever seen that meme that has like a role, and then it has all the different views of how people see that role? I actually brought a meme with me today just to kind of give you some insight into the pastor role. And so if you guys can see it up there, the first one there is what my friends think I do. The middle one is what my mom thinks I do. The last one is what the world thinks I do. They think we police people and threaten them with hell. And then the last one is what millennials think I do. And then what I think I do. And then what I usually do. And so this is a lot like us. We have different views of what we do and who we are, and psychology actually tells us that there's three selves within us, that there's the true self, the real self. It tells us there's the projected self, who we project to other people, and then the desired self or the aspired self, what we aspire to be. I also brought another meme just for fun, if you guys could throw that up there. It says, me on social media versus me in real life. I think a lot of us can relate to that. On social media, we're a different person, right? You got the phone up, you're like, hey, what's up? And then in real life, you're in a room like this with a bunch of people, and you're like, don't talk to me. I'm going to kind of have the seat in the furthest back, far away from people as much as possible. I think a lot of us can relate to this because we don't know how to act in certain environments, and we decide how we're going to act in certain environments. And I think this is for everybody, and I want to ask you, who's the real you? Which version of you is the most truest form if you're really at a very healthy state? And I think family has a lot to do with shaping who we are, helping us form our identity. Whether we like it or not, our family of origin shaped who we are today. The person you are today, they had a big part to play in it. And here recently, I became part of a new family because I got married. I have some in-laws now, and I have a different family. And so I noticed something interesting. I don't think dysfunctional families know they're dysfunctional. You know what I mean? And I'm not talking about my in-laws. After now seeing my in-laws' interactions and the dynamics over the holidays and the way they interact on a day-to-day basis, and I have some contrast with my own family, I've started to see there's a little bit of dysfunction in my family that I couldn't see because I was in it the whole time. I couldn't see the dysfunction. It's hard to see it when you're in it, right? And I've noticed that there is some dysfunction in my family. Now, my family's not like super messed up or something, but there is a little bit of dysfunction there. And I don't know what kind of family you came from. I don't know if it was a really awesome family that you guys got along great. You love each other's company. It's hard to leave each other. And I don't know if you came from maybe a family that wasn't so great, where you kind of try to not see each other as much as possible. I don't really know, or maybe you land somewhere in between. But the cool thing is that for us that are believers, that have chosen to follow Christ, that have chosen to give our life to Christ, that has now, because of Jesus, giving us the opportunity to be part of a new family, to be part of God's family. And we'll see this in John. If you guys can throw that up in the screen, that is John 1:12 through 13. And it says, "Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will," wink, 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 "but born of God." Born of God. We are born again, born in the Spirit, and we become part of a spiritual family. And this is really good news for us because not all of us came from great families. And being part of God's family is super important. God's family is the church. And today we say things like, "I'm going to church." If someone asked you later today, "What'd you do today?" You say, "Well, I went to church." Back then when this was written, that wouldn't make sense. Because church was an elect group of people. It wasn't a place you went to. And so it would be similar for us to say something like, they say, "What'd you do today?" "I went to family." Like, "You went to see your family?" "No, I went to family." Okay? And so to say we went to church it wouldn't make sense back then because the church was a body. It was the body of Christ. It was God's family. And I don't know about you guys, but when I first started to really take my faith serious and I wanted to really grow in discipleship and walk with God, I wasn't real thrilled about church. Now, I grew up Catholic, and my experience in the Catholic Church wasn't like that great. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't that great. I wasn't particularly interested in continuing to go to church once my family kind of stopped going. And I started to rationalize. I was like, well, you know what? If Jesus lives in my heart, I have a Bible that I can read. There's lots of preachers that are on TV. Back then, there really wasn't podcasts. Now we have podcasts. But I was watching all these preachers on TV, and I could watch any preacher I wanted at any time. And now it's even more easier to not be part of a church more than it was back then, because now you can stream any worship song, have your own worship sesh, right? And then you can pick a variety of messages from any preacher you want to hear. Just tune in through YouTube or podcast or whatever, right? And you don't have to get up early. You don't have to actually be in a physical location. You don't have to say hi to anybody. You don't have to serve. You don't have to be about anybody else but yourself. It's pretty convenient. It's pretty convenient. And I was trying to sign up for that package deal. I didn't want to come to church. I wasn't real thrilled about getting up early. I don't know who invented church being a morning thing. I don't know. I mean, if I would have invented it, it would have been a night thing. But I didn't want to get up early, and I was wondering, like, do I really need church? I think I can have church by myself. God's in my heart. I can pray. I can have fellowship with God. I don't know if I really need church. But long story short, God started to press upon my heart that I needed to be part of a church. And in the process, I didn't really know why, but I just started to look for a church. And I didn't start at this church. I started at another church, but over a period of time, I started to slowly get a clearer picture and realize why church is so important, why we need it. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be trying to answer the question, why do we need church? Do I really need to be here? Do I really need to come every Sunday? Do I really need to plug in? Do I really need to be part of a group? Do I really need to serve? Is this really important? And I want to try to answer that question. And by doing so, I want to tell you my first point, which is that we do need church. And the reason we need church is because we need God's family to become whole. We need God's family to become whole. Now, I want to real quickly define what wholeness is. Wholeness just means that you are in touch with your real self. You have a whole person that knows who he or she is, and you can live with a whole heart on a day-to-day basis from that place. That you can be a whole person. Now, God created us, humans, human being, mankind, whole from the beginning. He created Adam and Eve. He created man in his image, and that was a whole image, unfractured, untainted. But then we all know the story, sin entered the world. That picture got fragmented, and now we live in a broken world. We're broken people, and we need Jesus to put us back together again, right? All right. So, but we cannot become whole apart from God speaking into our spirit and affirming who we are, and we also won't achieve wholeness without the fellowship of his body or his family. We need people to help us see who we are really, to discover and get a better, more clear picture of who we are. Now, early on at Tree of Life, it was very common. Tree of Life is 10 years old, and so this was a long time ago. Early on in the early years, it was very common for us to affirm and validate each other verbally. It was very common. It was happening all the time. We'd be at a get-together or a life group or just hanging out, or it'd be someone's birthday, and we'd sit them up in front of everybody, and everybody would speak into their life, and they'd be like, the gifts I see in you is you are compassionate, and you are kind, and all this stuff, right? And it was amazing because we would build people up, and there would be this atmosphere of love and joy and affirmation and healing and wholeness and redemption. And I remember this started to really impact me. You're looking at a very different person. A very different person. You're looking at 10 years worth of healing, wholeness, and recovery because of being part of this community. Amen? You can clap for that. You can clap for that. And so early on, this was the normal thing, and I remember one specific time, I think it was a men's retreat we were at, and we had created this big bonfire, and all the men were sitting around it, and so Pastor Gabe was leading it, and he was telling us that we were all going to go around the circle and take turns to affirm each other and kind of speak life into one another. And I remember this particular one because I remember every time we did this, there's multiple people that are speaking life and giving life to each other. And every time someone would get up to say something, I was like, on the inside, I was like, I hope they say something about me. I hope they say something about me. I couldn't get enough of it. We all want to be loved, right? We all want to know we're special. We all want to know we mean something. We all want to know we're significant. I'm no different. I had that need in my heart. But I remember this one specific time, Pastor Gabe got up in front of all the guys, and I was thinking, I wonder if he's going to say something about me. I wonder if he's going to say something about me. And sure enough, he did. And I remember he affirmed me like nobody had ever affirmed me in my life. Now, my dad is a good guy, but he's not perfect. And if you saw how he was raised, you would say, man, this dude's knocking it out of the park. But my dad never affirmed me verbally. Never once told me he was proud of me. Never once said, son, you're doing good. I'm proud of the man you become. He never once said that. And my heart really needed to hear that, but I didn't know. I didn't know what I was looking for. There was something missing on the inside, a part of me that was fractured in my soul. And Pastor Gabe rose up to fulfill this role. And he started to speak into me, and he was declaring all the good things that he saw inside of me. And I remember getting so emotional, and I just started breaking down. I looked like the SpongeBob big eyes where they got, all the tears in their eyes. That was me. And so someone actually recorded a clip of it, and I brought it today so you guys can see. If you guys can go ahead and roll that.
Now look in the mirror and tell me what you see. You see Junior, you see Junior. Well, you want to know what I see? I see pride. I see power. I see a bad mother who don't take no crap of nobody.
You really see all that?
Yeah, man. But it's not about what I see. It's about what you see. Now look in this mirror and tell me again what you see.
Well, I see
Pride.
pride.
Power.
And I see
A bad mother who don't take no crap
off of nobody.
again.
I see pride.
Can't hear you.
I see power. I see a bad mother who won't take no crap off of nobody.
Once again.
I see pride.
Junior.
I see power. I see a bad mother who won't take no crap off of nobody.
That's very
right. Junior,
We looked different back then. Pastor Gabe didn't have any hair, and I was into colorful sweaters. Now, obviously, that wasn't a clip, guys, but it was a lot like that. Maybe not played out the same way, but it felt the same. You know what I'm saying? He was calling things in me that I couldn't see, that he could see. And this really impacted and shaped who I was and who I was becoming. Now, I worked at UPS for a long time, and while I worked there, I was in management. And I remember desperately looking for everyone's approval. I remember constantly looking to my bosses, wondering if they were pleased with me, looking for validation and affirmation. And then I had some employees that worked for me, that reported to me. And I remember wanting my employees to all be happy. But normally, employees look at their bosses and want affirmation. I couldn't give it to them. I hadn't even been affirmed. And I was looking for them to tell me, you're a good boss. We like the way you lead. And they never did. No, they eventually did. I got affirmed by them too. But I was constantly looking for approval. And I remember if I got some criticism or some negative feedback, or if someone was unhappy with me, it devastated me. I couldn't process it or handle it emotionally. It left me very crippled. And it was hard to process and really like myself, if you guys know what I mean. And I remember slowly transitioning out of this job while I was already attending this church. And God led me to another job, a better paying job. But at this other job, I wasn't as valued as I was at my previous job, and I actually wasn't even as good at this other job as I was at my previous job. And so I would receive some criticism and I would receive some feedback, and I wasn't necessarily as appreciated or valued as I was at UPS. And I noticed something different had changed inside of me after being at Tree of Life and being in such an affirming environment for such a long time. Something had shifted. Suddenly, when I was receiving criticism and feedback, it didn't devastate me. It didn't crush me. Suddenly, something happened in my heart where I was like, you know what? That what you're saying doesn't hurt me anymore. I feel whole. I feel valued. I know that I'm worth something. And I'm actually part of a group of people, a core family that finds value in me, that loves me, that supports me. I know who I am. And it didn't crush me anymore. I was able to, in a healthy way, receive this feedback and work on myself and get better because of the love that I had received from this community. And that's what it looks like to become whole. Now, in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the love chapter, the chapter that's probably the most popular chapter in the whole Bible that they read at weddings, where Paul gets all poetic and starts penning and writing down what love is. And love is patient, love is kind. You guys, I think, are familiar with it. So this is that chapter. And so after he gets done kind of talking about love, he starts talking about maturity. And it's real interesting what he has to say. And so starting at verse 11, all the way to 12, which is just 2 verses, he says, when I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. And then he says, for now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. Now, if you guys could leave that up there just for a second. The way that that's written is a little bit odd. It doesn't quite flow, maybe in the way we would write today, in the way that we speak English, but I want to kind of take a second to explain this. So Paul is talking about love, right? And the reason he was talking about love is he was bringing correction to the Corinthian church because they had discovered that they had spiritual gifts, and they were trying to lift these gifts or wave these gifts over people as if it made them better. They were looking for validation. They wanted to be significant and important, and they had lost sight of what was really important. And Paul was bringing some correction here, and he was saying, look, guys, it's not about the gifts that you have. As a matter of fact, they won't even matter in the future. They'll be pointless. And the only thing that's going to matter is love, because love is going to be the only thing that lasts for eternity. These gifts to prophesy and do all these things, they're not going to matter, because when we mature and the Lord returns and brings the fullness of his glory and establishes a new earth and a new kingdom, we'll see everything very clearly as if we're looking at God face to face. And I think it's interesting that he compared it to growing up. He compared it to maturing. And he's saying that when he was a child, he grew up and he put away childish things. And so he's saying that when we're younger, or he's saying that when the Lord restores everything, it'll be as if we have matured and grown up. We won't need these things anymore because we'll see things clearly. And I think this goes this is a good example of how we see ourselves. When we start off as kids, we don't have a good image of ourselves necessarily, right? I guess a better way to say it is we don't have a complete picture of ourselves. We don't yet know who we really are, right? And as you get older, you're discovering who you are, but we discover who we are based on the interactions we have with people in life and the world. And so we need people to help us see who we are if we're going to be whole. But as Paul mentioned, it comes along with growing up, but we don't always mature when we grow up, right? Some of us get old, but we don't mature. And that brings me to my second point. You can't have wholeness without maturity. We need God's family to mature. We need God's family to mature. Now, maturity is really just cultivating and developing the God-given potential that He has placed inside of you. It's discovering your gifts, your talents, and using those to improve who you are, improve others, and build people up. Amen? Now, maturity is something that it doesn't just happen because we get older, and it's the same spiritually as well. Just because we're born again, we're saved. Just because you've been saved for a long time doesn't mean you're a mature Christian, right? It's not a byproduct of salvation. I got saved on this day. It's been 10 years. Now I'm mature. It doesn't work that way. And it's not a spiritual gift. We have to actually work at it. It's our responsibility to mature. And if you guys have ever heard the parable of the talents, which I don't have it on the screen, but it's in Matthew 25, 14 through 29. And for those of you that are following along in the YouVersion app, the outline's all there. The scripture's actually there. You can read it at a different time. But I'm just going to paraphrase and reference it. So in that parable, Jesus is describing a scenario where this guy came and he gave talents to 3 guys. And, the talents, I think it's interesting that they chose that word talent, but in the Bible, in this story, the talents actually represent money. He gave them a measure of wealth, something to steward, something to be responsible for. And one guy didn't multiply it at all, what he was given. And the other 2 guys did. And so when the master returns, he rebukes the one that didn't multiply what was entrusted to him. And to the ones that did, he celebrates them and actually takes the one from the guy that didn't do anything with it and gives it to the guy who multiplied the most. And I feel like this story really illustrates that God expects us to do something with what He's given us. Amen? How many of you have received a life from the Lord? Some of you are dead. Okay. Some of y'all like, yo, homie, I ain't gonna raise my hands. Keep preaching. So if the Lord has given you a life, you are responsible for stewarding it. We are responsible to mature. Now, the community and our family plays a part in it, but we are still responsible for taking initiative and working on our maturity, right? All right. So I was reading a book that Pastor Gabe assigned to us a long time ago. It's called The Life Model, Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You. Now, this book was written by some really smart people, some Christian psychologists that have over 20 years of experience, and they combined this information from neurological studies, their 20 years of experience in psychology, along with theology, and they wrote a book to explain how people grow, how they mature, and we're supposed to mature in stages, and they took the time to break this all down so that we could try to understand it. And so I'm going to go through some of these stages with you guys so you can see how we're supposed to mature. And there's 5 stages that we're all supposed to go through. And this is really a lifelong process. You don't stop maturing just because you get older. Even in old age, people still have a maturing process to go through. Now, what you'll see on the screen here in a minute is you'll see 2 sides. You can go ahead and throw it up there, guys. And so what you'll see on the left side is the personal tasks. That's what we're supposed to complete in the process while we're maturing. And you'll see the tasks on the right side, what family and community is supposed to provide for us while we're maturing and completing these tasks. And so, like I said, there's 5 stages. And so starting with the first one, it's the infant stage. It's from birth to age 3. And so the personal task, and this isn't an exhaustive list. This isn't like everything you will complete. This is just a couple of things for you guys to kind of get the idea. And so I don't know if you can see it from way out there, but I'm going to read it to you guys. On this side, personal task, between this age, you should be learning how to receive, begin to organize self into a person through relationships, expand capacity for joy, and learn how to return to joy from every unpleasant emotion. Now, what the family's supposed to do in contrast to that is gives unconditional love and care that matches the infant's needs without the infant asking. Parents delight in the infant and build strong, loving bonds with the infant, and then provides enough safety and companionship during difficulties so the infant can return to joy from unpleasant emotions. So there's a part for family and community to play. And in reading this book, I discovered how many of you guys are in favor of the method of, let them cry it out. That way they'll learn that they're not going to get held all the time. I think if you're Hispanic, that's your motto. So that's actually not good. It turns out that that's actually not a good approach. You actually want to meet all their needs and show them that you're going to come to their rescue. And when that tank has been filled and they've received enough of their needs being met, they learn how to become independent. But they will never become independent if their needs are not all first met. You can't give what you haven't received, right? And so for little kids, if our parents didn't do this, and there's probably no way for us to know, really, but it's important that all our needs are met, that we're surrounded by family and community to help us meet all our needs. And so going on to the next stage, which is the child stage, age 4 through 12. Again, personal tasks, can take care of self and ask for what is needed. That's a big deal. A lot of people can't ask for what they need. I didn't complete this stage until about 23. I'm being honest with you guys. Can take care of self and ask for what is needed, can say what one thinks and feels. I had a hard time with that. I was like, what do you mean you don't know how I feel? You don't know what I think? You're supposed to. My parents must have not met all my needs. I don't know. Anyways, develops enough persistence to do hard things. I think I just learned that last year. I expected everything to be easy for me. The last one, knows self and takes responsibility to make self understandable to others. It's your responsibility to make yourself understandable to everybody else. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know what you're feeling. They don't know what you like, what you don't like. It's your responsibility. And it's supposed to be learned at a childhood age. I know I'm super clinical on you guys right now, but this will be over soon. So on the family side, teaches and allows child to appropriately articulate needs. So if your kid's trying to tell you you need something, don't tell them to shut up. Hush, I'll tell you what you need. Let them tell you what they need. Challenges and encourages child to do difficult tasks the child does not feel like doing. So yeah, you should spank them, make them clean their room. But then love them a lot. Helps child to evaluate the consequences of own behaviors and to identify what satisfies him or her. That's a big deal. I remember one of my friends, he had a kid at age 17, 18, something. And back at this time, I was a little different. My lifestyle was a little different. We were kind of sitting on the porch, and our greatest goal in life was just to get wasted. And so we're sitting on the porch, and we're just trying to get hammered and forget life. And I remember this guy's kid walks out onto the porch or whatever and knocks something over or something, and he just gets up and responds with spankings. And then the kid, runs off or whatever. And I remember sitting there thinking, I don't think that kid knows why he got hit. I don't think he does. We have to help them evaluate the consequences. It's not fair for them to get a consequence if they never knew what it was from the beginning, right? Amen? All right, so next stage, third stage, which is adult stage, age 13 through birth of first child. Now, that's a big timeline there. Now, it doesn't mean that at age 13 you are an adult. It just means you can begin to accomplish adult tasks at this as early as 13. Not everybody does so. And so on the personal side, remain stable in difficult situations. Hello. I'm still trying to get that one down. I'm not even in adult stage yet. Cares for self and others simultaneously in a mutual satisfying relationship. Contributes to the community and develops group identity. And the last one, takes responsibility for how personal actions affect others, including protecting others from self. It's at this stage, you should be learning how to protect other people from the parts of you that are not good. It's your responsibility. All right, the family, what they're supposed to do in the community is affirms that the young adult will make it through difficult times. They need affirmation. Provides the opportunity to participate in group life and activities where peers can bond. And then the last one, teaches young adults that their behaviors impact others and holds the person accountable while still accepting and affirming the aspects of his or her true self. Now going to the next stage, which is the parent stage. The parent stage is the fourth stage, and this is from birth of first child until youngest child is an adult. So just by nature, technically, I have entered this phase, but emotionally, I'm telling you guys, I'm not there. I'm not there. And maybe you're not either. Personal task: protects, serves, and enjoys family, and takes care of children without expecting to be taken care of by the child in return. Some people are waiting for their children to grow up because they're going to take care of me when I'm old. That's your retirement plan, and it's not going to work. Second one, allows and provides spiritual parents and siblings. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. I want to really say that again. Allows and provides spiritual parents and siblings for their child. How many of you parents have provided spiritual parents for your children, apart from you? You know? And how many of you provided spiritual siblings for them? It's important. That can only happen in a church. Really. It's important. And that's what we're supposed to be accomplishing at this time. The last one, learns how to bring children through difficult times and return to joy from other emotions. And then this is what the family and community is supposed to be doing during this time. The community gives support to both parents to sacrificially contribute to their family and parenting. And then the next one is the community encourages relationships between children and extended spiritual family members. The community supports parents by giving them encouragement, guidance, breaks, and opportunities to recharge. I'm so blessed to be a part of this church. I don't know if I would have been not part of this church, if I would have had as many people say, bro, whatever you need, any help you need with the baby, let us know. Like, I can't even count all the people that have said this to me. It feels so good to have the support of the community. Last stage, which is the elder stage, not to be confused with the elder of a church. That's kind of two different things. The elder stage, beginning when your youngest child has become an adult. Personal task, sacrificially taking care of the community. Now you're taking care of a community. As you become an elder, establishes an accurate community identity and acts like self in the midst of difficulty. That's hard to do. Parents and matures the entire community. And then the way the community and family is supposed to respond is the community recognizes elders in the community. The community provides opportunities for elders to be involved with those in all of the other maturity stages. The community creates a structure to help the elders do their job, which allows people at every stage of maturity to interact properly with those in other stages and listen to the wisdom of maturity. That's what it should look like. That's what it should look like. Now, it's real interesting that in this book, after they explain the way that we're supposed to mature, there's this interesting thing that they discovered in neurology. They discovered that in our brain, there's this part that they call the joy center. The joy center. And this joy center is actually the foundation for all maturity and growth. For all maturity and growth. And I want to read a little excerpt from the book just so you guys can hear what they have to say, because there's no way that I could say this better than how they said it. They said, having enough joy strength is fundamental to a person's well-being. We now know that a joy center exists in the right orbital prefrontal cortex of the brain. It has executive control over the entire emotional system. The entire emotional system. When the joy center has been successfully developed, it regulates emotions, pain, control, and immunity centers. It guides us to act like ourselves. It releases neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, and it is the only part of the brain that overrides the main drive centers like food and sexual impulses, terror, and rage. Now, it's real interesting how much control that this joy center has. So it makes sense what my wife said to me. She says, this is the real you. This is the person I like to be around, the person of you that is in touch with joy. Because this other guy you bring home, he cannot come home, okay? Someone said, come on. Somebody relating out there. Now, it's interesting the way that we develop this joy center. How many of you want to have a dope, developed joy center? Almost everybody. It's cool. I know on the inside you raised your hand. So here's how that's developed. This is what's really interesting. Lean into this. Hear me. This is how you develop your joy center, which is what helps you mature. You can't mature without it. Okay? This is how it's developed. By being in authentic, loving, life-giving relationships. And it's the research backs this. The more time you spend in those relationships, the more it develops and the bigger it grows. Now, if you think about your joy center like a bucket that can hold something, the bigger your bucket is and the more joy that it can hold, the better you're going to be at handling difficulties in life and maintaining and staying whole in yourself and not coming apart and undone. Now, the smaller your joy bucket is, the less you can handle. Have you ever met someone that just cracks under pressure like nothing? Their joy bucket probably is not that big. They can't handle it. But here's the good thing. This part of our brain never stops growing. It never stops growing. And so even if maybe you grew up in a household where this wasn't fully developed properly, you can still grow in this area. You can still continue to develop it. Now, there was a guy that used to come to the church a while back, and I'm not going to mention his name or anything, but he's not around anymore. And I remember when this guy was coming around, when I met him, he was homeless, and he was coming around, and as we started to get to know him, I really admire how much attention Pastor Gabe gave him a lot of attention, showed him a lot of love. And this guy would come around, and he was drawing a lot of life out of the church. He was really getting a lot of love that I don't think he got when he was a child. And I don't know the details of his childhood, but I don't think he was really received what he needed. And I remember watching his interactions with people. How many of you guys have a toddler or have been around a toddler? There's a toddler in your life. Okay, if you're in the middle of something, do they care if they want something? No. Toddlers expect the universe to stop when they need something, right? Okay, this guy was in an adult body, but he had the emotional development of a toddler. And when a crisis would happen in his eyes, when something would happen that would just be like a regular problem to me and you, he fell apart. He would come around and he expected everyone to stop what they were doing to fix his problem. He couldn't fix it himself. And it's sad that sometimes we don't develop properly, and this is a severe case, but the truth is trauma gets in the way of our development, which takes me to my third point. We need God's family to recover from trauma. Now, trauma it plays a big part in who we are and how we develop, and they've discovered that trauma blocks you from growing. It blocks maturity. Trauma blocks maturity, and there's two types of traumas. There's A trauma and B trauma. A trauma and B trauma. Now, A trauma is things that should have happened that never happened. So that's like neglect, like you didn't receive the love that you needed. And then B trauma is things that happened that should have never happened, and that's like abuse and things of that nature. Now, how many of you guys know life givers and life drainers? And if you don't know any life drainers, that's because you're a life drainer. No, I'm just kidding. No. No. If you're not in touch with it or you don't know what I'm talking about, let me explain it. Life drainers are the people that you find yourself avoiding because they take too much energy to deal with. And you're like, I don't like the way I feel after I interact with that person. I'm going to not interact with that person. And life givers are the people we are attracted to. I like how I feel when I'm with you, so I'm going to interact with you. I'm going to interact with you because you give me life. Now, trauma affects us and it makes us either become a life drainer or a life giver. Or I should say it makes us become a life drainer, not a life giver. But when we mature and we become whole, we become life givers. We become life givers. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to try to breeze through these slides real quick. What we saw earlier, I want to show you now the consequences of what happens when these things aren't met. And this is because trauma enters our life. And trauma is just sin. Trauma is sin. Sin adds to our life what should not be and subtracts what should be. And so if I neglect my family, that's sin. I'm sinning against them. Now, it's not a heaven or hell issue, but I'm still sinning against them. And for those of us that are alive and breathing, we've been impacted by sin. Okay? And now this is what it looks like when we don't develop properly. If you guys can throw up that first screen, and I'm going to try to breeze through this really, really fast. We're just focusing on this side. So in infant stage, what happens in adult life is they have a weak identity, fear and coldness dominate bonds with others, has difficulty bonding, which often leads to manipulative, self-centered, isolated, or disconnected personality. And then the last one is has uncontrollable emotional outbursts, inability to regulate emotions, excessive worry, and depression, avoids escapes, or gets stuck in certain emotions. Next one, which is the child stage. In adult life, they can't take responsibility for self and experiences continual frustration and disappointment because needs are not met, is often passive-aggressive, is obsessed with or addicted to food, drugs, sex, money, power, in desperate chase to find satisfaction, fails to develop true identity, conforms to outside influences that misshape identity. Next stage, adult. Lacks the capacity to be in mutually satisfying relationships. There is a such thing as being in a relationship where you're giving more than you're getting, right? We don't want that. And leaves others dissatisfied and frustrated, does not become a life-giving contributor to the community, is self-absorbed and uses others, drains society. And then last is controlling, harmful, blaming, seekers of approval. Hello, reminds me of me. And tries to prove self to the world. Big time me. All right, the parent stage, when they don't do what they're supposed to, this is what happens. Family members are distant, deprived, feel worthless and unimportant. Children take care of parents, which actually blocks their maturity instead of facilitating it. A lot of times when we see kids that take care of their parents, we're like, oh, they're so mature. It's actually harming them. And then children are vulnerable to peer pressure and are less likely to succeed in life's goals. And then the last one, parents get overwhelmed without extended, that's supposed to say family support. And then the last one, the elder, the overall maturity of the community declines. The overall maturity of the whole community declines. Life-giving interactions diminish along with life-giving interdependence, stunting the community's growth. Fragile, at-risk people fail to heal or survive. When elders do not lead, unqualified people do, resulting in immature interactions at every level of the community. That's what happens when we don't mature properly and when we're developed by trauma. But there's good news. There is good news. If you guys will turn to Psalm 92, or if you'll just look at the screen, Psalm 92, God promises this: the righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of the Lord, they will flourish in the courts of our God. They will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green. Is that all I have? Okay. So, real figurative language there. What that just means is that you stay life-giving on the inside no matter how old you get. And by being planted in the house of God and being part of His family, you will flourish in life. You will be restored. You will recover from traumas. You will mature, and you will become a whole individual. Amen? All right, guys. So I've talked about, you guys go ahead, clap. So I've talked about three reasons why we actually need the church. Like, these relationships are actually crucial to our development. If you care to be a healthy adult. I mean, if you don't, then don't go to church. But the last one and the final point, number 4, is what the church needs. God's family needs you. It needs you, and it needs me. We need each other. And not only are we supposed to be receiving life from the family of God, but we're supposed to give life too, right? We're supposed to contribute to the community. We're supposed to develop our strengths, our skills, our talents. We're supposed to discover who we are. And you can't do that if you don't contribute anything. You can't develop anything if you don't contribute anything. And now in Ephesians, Paul illustrates, or I should say God illustrates, his vision for the church through Paul, and that is Ephesians 4:11 through 16. And this is such a beautiful picture. If you guys would just imagine this, if the church was functioning this way. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers to equip his people for works of service. So what is it for? So that would imply that he assumes that we're going to do works of service, right? That means contributing, so that the body of Christ may be built up. So if the church is weak and not built up, it's because not everybody's doing their part. You know what I'm saying? All right. Until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ, then we will no longer be infants tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of Him who is the head, that is Christ. From Him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. We got a part to play. The church needs you, and the church needs me to get up and do something. You know what I'm saying? That's why here at Tree of Life, we're so much about groups, teams, and showing up on Sunday. Groups, teams, and showing up on Sunday. Now, if you're sitting here and you're like, man, I see myself in that. I see some areas I need to grow up in and mature in, and I think I'm ready to participate in this process and get involved. I want to tell you, teams are perfect for developing your gifts, strengths, skills, and actually meeting important people in God's family that God's trying to connect you with. And it's a safe setting because there's lots of people around. It's not as small and intimate as a group. And so you can kind of small talk as you get to know people while you're discovering your gifts and developing your strengths and figuring out what you're good at. Did you guys know, before I started serving here at Tree of Life, I didn't even know how to edit video. I learned how to do that here just because I made myself available. I didn't know how to communicate. I was so nervous the first time I gave a speech in school. I remember holding my paper, and I remember it was literally doing this. I developed that skill here. I've developed so many skills here just because I got involved and began to develop myself, and then I got affirmed by the community. Thank you, Melissa, earlier for saying that I've impacted more people than I realized. That's the affirmation. And groups, the reason we're so for groups is because that's a small, intimate setting where you can begin to develop those relationships that you need, those authentic, life-giving relationships to develop your joy center so that you can start maturing and heal and recover from some of these traumas. And then church, why show up to church? We say, keep believing. And that doesn't just mean at church, that means in life. Don't give up. But church is important. Why do I need to go to church? If you just go to a group and you're like, well, I'm getting healed here, and you just show up to serve and like, I'm getting to use my gifts here, but you don't come on Sunday, you're cheating your family. Your family needs the entire community to be healthy and whole. Did you know your affirmation at home is not enough? They need to be affirmed by people that are not in their family. They're outside of their family. That's why when I'm walking around and I see some of the little kids and the little boys, I give them high fives and I'm like, man, you're strong. That hurt my hand, and I'm trying to affirm them for the age that they are. And the little girls, I tell them that they're beautiful and that they're smart because I want them to see a safe male tell them the truth about who they are that sounds like what their dad's telling them at home. So that later in life, they're not falling for some knucklehead's game. You know what I'm saying? And that's why we need each other. That's why we need the church. That's like the whole picture. That's what it looks like. That's what this is really supposed to look like. And as I'm coming to an end, I want to. We're going to go ahead and play this video here in a minute. Some of you saw this last week. This is just a good story of what it looks like when someone plugs into the church and begins to heal and mature and develop. And this is a story of some of the people that come to this church.
For a long time, before we ever set foot into Tree of Life, I had been dealing with this health issue where my body would ache. I was seeing doctor after doctor and trying to find answers, and nobody would help me. And I was getting kicked out of places. She was with me, and so I was out of options. I remember thinking, like, what am I supposed to do? I couldn't find help. So I wasn't raised in church. I didn't know the Lord growing up. My parents had faith. I would see them pray, but it was never pushed upon me. I was never asked to go to church. Really, God wasn't in the equation for me growing up, even when we started our relationship.
I did go to church off and on with my family, but it was more so because that's what we needed to do. We were dating for about 2.5 years or so, and at this point we were really struggling. We really were not in a good place at all. My cousin actually invited us to Tree of Life. She was praying for us. I know people within the church were praying for us also. Just being around other couples and having that support system and really kind of learning what it was to be married and the importance of it and how important it is to God, it really, really encouraged us.
Coming in, I felt like accepted really quickly. Like I felt like people wanted to be around me. I remember getting prayed for and somebody hugging me, and I've never experienced a hug like that. You know what I mean? I think what really helped me get plugged in is that I gravitated towards wanting to help with like the production side of the church, with helping out with sound. So I think that was probably the first thing that caught my attention, was that, man, music is great, people are awesome, and hearing Pastor's word every week would just, it's like he was speaking to us. It still does, but it was like speaking directly to our relationship.
While I was praying, God actually gave me a vision of myself on the prayer team at the altar praying for people. And it really, really scared me. It really freaked me out. And I shut it down really quick. And I said, no, you got the wrong person, God. That doesn't make sense. And God's so patient that, he always reminded me of the vision. But I never felt, confident to even tell anybody about it. But when I finally did, I spoke to my cousin who helps lead the prayer team. And she said, you don't have to know anything. It's not about you. It's about God and the person that you're praying for connecting to God. It's not about your words. It's not about anything that you could ever say. It's just about God being there in that moment while you're praying for people. And so that really stuck with me. And I'm really, really grateful to be a part of that team. And through that, I've grown a lot in my walk with God personally, and just in that team also within the church. So I really love it.
For 8 years that I've served at the church, I never really felt connected to people at the church. And it's crazy because I've been there for a long time, right? You would think, and through group, I feel a part of the church like never before. And it's like the next level of serving. Serving is great and it's bomb, but there's an element of connecting emotionally with people that you really can't have on a Sunday service. And it's been great. It's been a big blessing. I feel now connected to people within the church more than ever. And it's fun. We have a blast. And it's the best thing about it is that it's allowed us to grow as a couple together, and it's showing in the way we parent and the way we love each other. It's phenomenal.
I don't know how we would ever do it without the support of the church and without our relationship with God. There's just no way. There's no way that we could. I don't even know that we would be married, let alone have a thriving marriage. I don't know how we would be able to parent or just be good people of society without the church and without our relationship with Christ. There's no way I would see it.
What a beautiful story. Guys, would you go ahead and stand to your feet? As we come to an end here, I want to make a statement. If you don't remember any of the things that I mentioned in this entire message, remember one thing. It takes a whole community to have a whole heart. It takes a whole community to have a whole heart. And if that is your desire to have a whole heart, it's going to require this entire community to do that. And so with that being said, I want to just ask you to bow your heads for a moment and close your eyes. And I want to ask you a question while you reflect. What is God highlighting to you from this message? What is God drawing your attention to? What is the Holy Spirit revealing to you in this moment?